Good morning. It is day 5. You can see that the pine needles are on the ground. We had some rain yesterday. Some remnants of the tropical storm hurricanes off to the east in Louisiana. The dogs out for a walk this morning. And oddly, I can't flip the camera back around, which is not great. So you'll get to see what I'm seeing today. Reflecting back on yesterday, the kids had a bit more to do, but a lot of it was still introductory stuff, which after talking to them this morning, that was effectively what they were supposed to do. Was a lot of introduction, similar to what we might do in higher ed. Little assignments like making a slide in Google Slides that represents them. Another teacher had them use Flipgrid to make a video that was representative of themselves. That was an instance where I wound up having to help my daughter get stuff figured out because the microphone on the Lenovo laptop that she has was not capturing her voice. We got the video, but it wouldn't capture her voice. So that took me a while to figure out what was going on. Sorry, there will be some stops and starts because my dogs are pretty ornery and they want to do what they want to do. Oh yeah. Especially this one over here. It probably took me 2 hours. I installed a bunch of new drivers, I did troubleshooting, I kept trying to record videos to see if there was an issue, downloaded a whole new browser to see if that was the issue, switching from Edge to Firefox. But what I finally figured out is there may be a hardware issue with the microphone on the laptop, which was not a very expensive laptop. I think I paid $250, $300 at Best Buy for it 3 or 4 years ago. And otherwise it works really well. It's got an AMD chip, which seems to work better than my son's Intel chip does on his, which is I think I paid $350 for it, but it was originally like $750, $800. His Dell, he's been using my MacBook Pro some and alternating when his Dell is not working super well. Although both of them are using their phones pretty significantly. But what I wound up doing that finally fixed my daughter's problem, and so for those of you that are having audio issues, because a lot of teachers are asking students to record videos and audio on their computers, is I actually had to plug in a separate microphone. I actually have an older and a newer blue snowball mic, so she's using my older white blue snowball mic, which is confusing. The company's name is Blue, but the microphone itself is white, and I don't even know that they make a blue microphone. And then I actually use my black, I think it's 2 years old, snowball mic that has 3 settings. I love that microphone. I can actually record pretty much an entire room, large room, capturing everybody's voices in it with that mic. The older one is better for things like podcasting and close work, but at least I was able to kind of solve that problem. But going back to what they're doing, a lot of this is introduction, not very much content. I think the first 3 weeks, all of the students in the school district are online, so I can only imagine if parents that don't know how to do a lot of troubleshooting or struggling with laptops and phones and stuff. So thinking about some of what I talked about yesterday, we need a lot of redundancy built into our K-12 options for students, because they may not be able to do the high-tech option. I know that as ed tech type people, that's what we all want kids to do, but it is unlikely that that is what we're actually going to be able to do in all instances. Some kids may not really have much technology at all, and if there's a problem, let's say a district Chromebook or iPad or other laptop is locked down and there's a problem, the kids can't fix it themselves. So that's going to create some issues. I don't really know what the situation is in terms of access to the laptops from home. When I have to fix my own dad's computer, which is like 6-7 hours away, I use a tool that allows me to access his stuff. And I have to do that fairly frequently, probably every other month. So that's going to create a ton of workload in the school districts, and they may need additional personnel to just keep up with all of the software and hardware issues that they're likely to encounter. Overall, again, it's first week, so similar to day 1, day 2 yesterday, they didn't have a ton of work. I think my son was done with everything by 10 o'clock in the morning. He had completed all of his activities successfully. My daughter, she kind of spread things out throughout the day. She has gotten obsessed with sewing machine that my mother got her 5 years ago and wants to sew. So she takes breaks from doing the asynchronous activities and works on her sewing. So I got pulled away from doing other things to go help her get thread at Michael's yesterday, because she blew through the thread that she already had in a day. But she's getting better at it. She's learning something that she wants to learn, which is good. So, and she's still getting all of her other activities done. One of the challenges that she's having is a lot of stuff is not getting put up by the time that is kind of scheduled during the day for her to work on it, and she'll find out only later that it's up. Like yesterday, school was supposed to be done by 3:30, 4 o'clock, and at 3:45 all of a sudden one of the teachers had posted an assignment, and she kind of panicked because she thought she had to do it right then, and she was supposed to be leaving, and she doesn't understand due dates or how things are structured in Canvas, and I had to look and see that the assignment isn't actually due until today and wasn't really assigned until today, so it wasn't clear because there's not a lot of communication about that. So we have a lot of learning to do here that's going on. A lot of normative stuff where there's new rules being established by the teachers. Teachers don't always have like firm, clear rules for what needs to be done and when. Everybody's having to be super flexible, which is understandable. I was looking at the way that the courses were set up, and a lot of it's not organized in a super clear way. There's not much standardization to how the learning management content is set up, and that's probably going to need to change so students have some expectations. It can be standardized within content areas. It can still be fairly flexible, but I haven't really seen learning goals and objectives stated anywhere in any of the courses, which, it's hard to get those done all the time, and I have not always been great about it, but I've gotten better at it over the years and making sure that that's embedded in my courses so students know what to expect. I saw one class where things were structured day by day. A lot of the teachers are opening things one day at a time so students don't get ahead, which makes sense. But there's still not a lot of content because it's week 1, so I'm interested to see what goes on going forward. In my own class, students are just kind of in the asynchronous week 1, gradually doing the activities and assignments that are due next week. Because I didn't know exactly when I was going to be teaching until pretty much Friday of last week. I didn't know if I was teaching Monday or Wednesday. There was some confusion because almost everything said Monday, but then there was one place in the syllabus where it still said Wednesday that I didn't know because it's referenced like 40, 50 different places in the syllabus, which gets confusing. So one of the things about planning and operations in departments is people need to know well ahead of time when they're teaching, if they have synchronous nights assigned, so that they can get everything in the learning management system done correctly. Sorry, the dogs are trapping me here. You can't wait until the last second. Everything needs to be done like 3 months ahead of time if possible, because people are having to go in and fix a ton of stuff in their courses. And when you've got staff in charge of stuff, they don't really know how things are structured. And so faculty and department chairs really need to communicate to staff what they can and cannot do in terms of waiting on things and creating assignments for synchronous class meetings if you're doing those online. And if you've got something like we do, where we both have residential and online programs, you have to make sure that the teaching assignments are split up in such a way that the instructors can have their needs met in terms of you can't be teaching at the same time in 2 different classes, for example. So it becomes super complicated and it needs to be done way ahead of time. So that's kind of where we're at with that. I probably worked 12 hours yesterday, but I got pulled away from doing my university work fairly frequently to help my kids with stuff, or to just answer questions or tell them they're doing okay, because they need that support. And that's cool, because I still work like 85 to 100 hours a week anyway, and work weekends and everything else. But the way that we work as faculty, the way that parents work when they have their kids at home, anybody in an administrative or management role is going to have to understand that this all is going to have to change pretty significantly, and you're going to have to be flexible, and things are just going to take longer. And in all honesty, they probably should. Maybe we'll have better products and services if we slow down a little bit instead of going completely insane and racing ahead all the time without thinking everything through and the consequences. So maybe there will be some positives out of all of this. But I know the learning management systems are having a ton of problems. I posted something on Twitter yesterday. A private equity company bought out Canvas, and even before they bought them out, in order to make themselves more attractive, that company had already shed like 10% of its workforce. I think it's up to like 30 to 40% of its workforce has been cut now since they were bought out. And a lot of the things that they kind of promised the public they wouldn't do, they have done in order to profit, because that was viewed as inefficiency. And as somebody with an operations management degree, I can tell you that one of the first things you do is you cut labor costs because you have too much redundancy. Well, the problem is we've now cut so much redundancy out of the system, so much of the fat that protects an organization in times when things get confusing and difficult and challenging, that we now don't have enough resources when there are problems. So there's this idea of cost to efficiency, and pure management consultants who do just straight operations management based on mathematical models are going to cut everything to the bone in order to increase profits. The problem is when you cut everything to the bone, like a lot of the ed tech companies that have been bought out by big private firms have done, if there's any sort of emergency, we call it an emergency supply. So in this instance, it's an emergency supply of labor, an emergency supply of hardware, so that people have things like the servers they need, so that there's a redundancy in case servers go down, so that there's backups, or that the servers are replaced often enough that you don't have interruptions in service to your consumers. That stuff's all gone in many instances because of this push towards efficiency. So if you are trying to decide on a learning management system for your school district or your university, you're going to need to dig into the weeds and find out if these people that are taking over the companies that provide you with services are really going to be able to provide those services, or if they are shifting towards, like, say, selling student data model, which is what some folks are doing in different companies. And if they just are going to reduce their service responsiveness so that you're not really getting what you need. And if you're a company that is expecting massive growth and you're cutting labor force, you're cutting resources so you can increase profits, you're probably not going to meet that scale up demand when you get a ton of new customers. You just don't have the resources. Plus, if you're cutting everything back and you're making the people that are left miserable and exhausted, you're harming your products and services a ton because they can't be responsive. They're exhausted, they're depressed because they know they can't really meet those requirements over time. So there's a lot, as somebody who's trying to decide on how they're going to support their K-12 school district or their university or community college, that goes beyond just what's the price. Because when we buy a product at a certain price, we can expect a certain level of support and responsiveness. And if you're buying heavily discounted stuff, expect a poor level of support. And even if somebody promises you stuff, you have to look at whether or not it's reasonable to think they can actually deliver it. And if people are changing things in the middle and you see that all of a sudden the company that is supposed to be supporting your university has cut a ton of the workforce at their company in order to increase profits, you have to think about what that's going to do to the service level that you're going to receive and try to decide if this is a company you want to stick with in the future. So that's just some of the stuff to think about. In 18 minutes, this is longer than I'd like, but it's supposed to be about 103 to 105 here in Denton today. So very hot today, tomorrow, the next day. Then we're supposed to get some rain and cool off into the upper 80s for a little bit, which should be nice. I honestly have no idea what's going on in the news today because the kids got here early. I can feel myself wearing down a little bit throughout the week as I juggle too many things, trying to get too much done. That's something else we all have to be super aware of, is as our workload increases, we're going to get more tired and be capable of less overtime. And we need to be respectful of other people's experiences with that and be aware of how it's affecting us and manage our workload accordingly. In the meantime, we have a pretty blue sky day with a few clouds. Of course, in a couple hours, those will all be gone as the heat kicks up. But I hope you all have a great day and a great weekend, and I'll talk to you next week.